Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another special video. And today, Raphael and I are continuing our series on the Major Arcana and how the cards in the Major Arcana are tied to different astrological symbolism and signs and planets and all of that. And today we're going to be talking about the Empress. And if you don't know about Raphael, he's a really incredible tarot reader. I highly recommend that you check out his YouTube channel where he does weekly forecasts and he does all sorts of really interesting videos about numerology. And he's also an excellent tarot reader, you guys. I just had my second reading with Raphael and it was incredible. Definitely he's my go-to for tarot, so I highly recommend booking a reading with him if you haven't done that. Definitely the best tarot reader I've come across, and I've come across quite a few being an astrologer. Thank you, Raphael, so much for being here and for doing this with me. I'm super excited.
Likewise. Wow. Super humbled by that introduction. So thank you so much. And, you know, right back at you. I recently just had an astrology reading with you, which was absolutely phenomenal. Really spot on. I think you nailed my character quite nicely, which was, I was like, oh, damn, no hiding from that one then. Which was great and really actually helped me put a lot of things into place at the moment. So thank you so much. Yeah, really excited. As you said, today we're talking about the Empress. So from here, we kind of crossed the threshold. Last week, if you remember, guys, you'll probably remember we talked about the High Priestess. So now what we've done, we've crossed the threshold. So we talked about last week how she sat in front of the veil and it's got all these pomegranates in. So the reason I said to everybody last week, you want to remember that, is because we're going to see it again. We're going to revisit it. So the Fool is kind of like that pure potential energy. It's all things, no things in one. Then we hit the Magician, where that energy starts to become shaped, or starts to be channeled into something, or to create something, or maybe even becoming a spoken word or an idea. It then hits the High Priestess, and so those three make up what's known as the supernal triangle. That's kind of like the heavenly celestial sort of sphere. It's like right out there. It's like that place of you know, that's beyond sort of the realms that we're used to kind of dealing with. So we cross the threshold then into the real world, into the tangible world, into the world that we're kind of really aware of, like the sensual world. So if I talk about like the sensual world, the five sense world, the sense of reality, things that you can touch, taste, smell, interact with, what kind of planet would you be thinking of when I said that?
Well, yeah, that's obviously Venus and and
Love
Taurus.
it.
That's like a very Taurus energy. Taurus is fixed earth. It's everything that's real and only that, really.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect. And as you can see there in the bottom, you've got the
Yeah.
symbol for Venus as well, which is brilliant. So the High Priestess, she sat in front of the veil, right?
Mhm.
And if you look at her, if you look at the Empress on her dress, you can see very, very similar. They're like the pomegranates again.
Like
So she's
wearing
now
the
crossed out. Yeah, so she's wearing the veil. Beautiful, perfect. She's crossed that threshold now. So she's come out of the spiritual, out of the sort of ethereal realm, and crosses into this world, into the tangible, where you can start to interact with the world, where things actually take shape and start to form into things that you can touch, that you can interact with. So those pomegranates again, this is on the other side of it. It represents the physical world, or things becoming tangible. This is like the fruits of labor. So we talked about the High Priestess being the point of inception, let's say, or conception even, whereas the Empress is the point where that becomes real. So she's now like a pregnant mother, effectively. She's, you know, all things that are beautiful, all things that are earthly, sensual, pleasurable, you'll find there. So when you see this card, one thing that I often say to people is, if you see this, when you think about Venus, if you could, what signs does she rule?
Well, she rules Taurus and Libra, so you know it has to do with the tangible, the physical, the material, and also relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. So exactly that. So when you see this card, sometimes you could be talking about a Taurus person, or sometimes you could be talking about a Libra person.
Okay.
She is specifically Venus, and you'll see this kind of be interchangeable in reading. So when you see it, attending cards will obviously flesh it out, much like an astrology reading, but you'll start to get an idea of, is this person, more about the beautiful ideals and the worlds and the poetry, or is this someone that's sort of, very sleeves up, hands on, kind of likes to get in there?
Okay, interesting. So it does kind of have a little bit of a Libra energy to it, but it's more like Taurus Venus.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So this, sorry.
Oh, I just said awesome. Keep going.
Uh,
Fascinated by this stuff.
This card also represents, so people, you could see this represent people that work in the beauty industry, hairdressers, people that work as beauty therapists, anybody, massage therapists. This is a really, really big card that comes up for people that work in those kind of industries. You'll see this a lot. And it is this idea of something beautiful, something pleasurable, something that is going to be not necessarily sustainable, but something that is nourishing, but nourishing in the physical sense, not like like the high priestess, which is like more of a sort of Cancerian nourishment.
So could it also be somebody who works like in finance, because Taurus is very much associated with like the financial sector and all of that as well?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you asked that, which is great. So when you see this card as well, it often speaks of, good finances, abundant things. This is a very prosperous card as well. You'll see it pop up like if somebody's got a project that they're working on, something that is effectively, so we talked about her being like a pregnant mother, right? Or a pregnant woman. So that idea isn't necessarily just like somebody actually being pregnant. It can also talk about that as a concept, as this idea of, I'm birthing something into the world, I'm creating something that I want to become tangible and bring me results, bring me physical, tangible, monetary, prosperous results. So yeah, absolutely. I've got a question about that as well, actually. So why does Venus rule money?
That's a good question. Venus rules material. It's not necessarily money. I mean, it can be, but it's like material possessions and things that are physically and very in a sensory way, things that are pleasurable. And so, you need money for that type of thing, but it can rule things like luxury items, food. It can rule, things like artwork and things that are really beautiful. It can rule all sorts of things. There is that association with money. But if I'm looking at somebody's chart, I'm not really looking at Venus as a true association with money necessarily. If I'm looking at their finances specifically, I'm usually looking at their second house and the ruler of their second house, and also the eighth house and the ruler of the eighth house. Venus is not as much associated with that. Venus is more associated with what you value, and how you experience pleasure, especially on the material plane and in that sort of sensory realm, as opposed to like money. But money is tied in with that, right? And so I mean, that's part of it as well. But every single planet has its own general signification. And so you have like a general significator of the body, which would be the moon. You have a general significator of money and finance, which would be Venus, right? So there are all these different things. But when you're looking at somebody's individual chart, different planets rule different things based on the house system and the house rulerships. And so that's going to get you a more specific, detailed explanation of that. But yeah, so it's associated with money. And if you're looking more on the mundane level, it's going to be associated with money. So looking at like more of the collective energies of it, because that's going to be more non-specific, but it's more about what you value, especially in that material sense.
Love that. That's perfect, actually. So, going back to what you said about the comfort, if you look at like the chair she sat on, it's like beautiful. Then she's got like this gorgeous pillow behind her. She looks like really comfortable, really plush, really lush, and it very much is that as well. This is also a nod to the things that you love, the things that you care about, the things that you value is exactly that, which is why the shield that the Venus symbol is sat on is heart-shaped, to show what you love, what you value, and the things that Venus necessarily rules. And I love this as well. So when you think about the surroundings around her, that is a true nod to Taurus. When you think of like this earthly sort of harvest like space, which I kind of always think of Venusian things in terms of green, like, you know, green
Yes.
growing things. I don't know why, I always do.
Well, that's such a Taurus thing too, because Taurus has such a strong association with nature and gardening and like beauty in nature. Like you'll find a lot of people with a strong Taurus energy that love to grow gardens. They're like really, you know, they have a green thumb. They like to nurture things that are very tangible and very beautiful. And they love to spend time in nature. Even if they don't grow gardens, they like to kind of like go to see the botanical gardens. They go on hikes in nature. Being in nature is very satisfying for someone with a lot of that Taurus energy. And so there's definitely that association there.
Yeah, you'll find that when the Empress comes up, especially when it's a significator for a specific person. If you see it represent like a person, this will be somebody that really cares about, you know, pretty, beautiful things. And it's the same, like even the cadence of their speech, the way that they'll put things across will be, you know, that's where I guess the Libran side comes in. But you'll find that they have this natural sort of flow about them. Like there's this
Yeah.
sense of things flowing. The other thing as well, in terms of its numerological value, the number 3 is what she rules, and this talks very much about birthing things into the practical, like into the tangible world. Um, she's also women in general, which I think Venus is as well, right?
Yeah, Venus rules like all women in the chart. And that thing that you said about the cadence of their speech, that's actually a Taurus thing too. Taurus rules the
Yeah.
throat. And so people with a lot of Taurus energy tend to have beautiful speaking and singing voices, especially when they have Mercury in Taurus and they have a beautiful way of articulating their thoughts. It's very simplistic and they don't say, there's not a lot of excess in their speech, but it's like very beautiful. Like it demands attention, like you want to listen. So that kind of goes with that Venus energy and that Taurus energy, especially too.
I love that. That's so cool. Also, painting, sculptures, because you mentioned like, you know, artistic and creative
Yes.
things. It's a very creative card, and you'll see this for people that love to work with their hands, that will make things. I think the most obscure thing that I ever saw was I pulled this card for a lady that I said to her, "You work with sculptures, right?" And she said, "Yeah, but not the typical kind." And I was like, "Oh, okay." She said she does ice sculptures.
Oh.
So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's really cool." Like it was just a really odd but really kind of cool association.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we talk, and what I talked about here as well is this is in terms of the mother. So when you see the Empress card, you are very likely, and again, so in a guy's spread, you'll probably be seeing his wife. It's very rarely that the Empress will come up as a mother in terms of somebody's mother. It's usually their wife or their partner that's expecting a child. Can definitely be that. And as I said, because this is where we cross into the physical realm, now we start to talk about heritage, we start to talk about family, the people that you are actually linked to, as opposed to you know, connected to by concept, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So it's more like the tangible sort of blood family lineage as opposed to like friends and people that you're associating with and that you care about. Because Cancer, you can have like a strong Cancer energy and have a terrible relationship with your family, but you usually have friends that feel like family and people in your life that have that association. I don't know that Taurus is necessarily associated with the family lineage in astrology, but it is associated with this nurturing sort of tangible aspect. So those are the two that you look at when you're looking at like home, family, that nurturing energy in the chart. You look at Cancer, which we just talked about with the which card was that? The High Priestess, and the Empress. We're talking about Taurus, right? And so those are the two nurturing feminine sort of energies in astrology as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love them as archetypes as well. And I think Taurus and even Capricorn, I think a lot of people kind of associate them with very masculine energy, but they forget they're like feminine signs, right?
Yeah. Especially that Taurus. That Taurus, it's like very very earthy, very luxurious, very beautiful, very feminine, and just very, it's the most sensual and sensory of all the signs. So they really appreciate the sensual pleasures in life, like taste, touch, smell, really good, rich foods, you know, hugs, and like, you know, getting that physical manifestation of love. Like if you have a Venus and Taurus person, they want to touch you, they want to hug you, they want to like be cuddled and snuggled and all of that. They're going to be very, very tactile, and maybe their love language is making really good, rich, nourishing comfort foods for other people as well, which can also be a Venus and Cancer thing, because it's kind of like wanting to care for other people. But Taurus, it's more about you want them to have that experience, right? It's like, I love eating this like chocolatey cake thing, so I'm going to make it for my partner so he can enjoy, you know, what a great experience that is, versus you know, the Cancer energy, which is more about, this is how you sustain life, this is how I care for you, right? Good nurturing food is going to help you to stay healthy. So it's like kind of more like a supportive, like motherly energy, versus like, I want you to enjoy this because it feels really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Okay, so I've got some questions for you, if you don't mind. So how would you most likely use a Venus retrograde? Like because we've got one coming up like literally this week, right?
That can be a tricky one. Usually you're kind of going back and looking at what you value in the area of life where Venus is transiting in your chart. And so you're kind of reevaluating your values and what really matters to you and what you really sort of appreciate. This can also be issues of self-worth, which is a Venus thing. Venus retrograde people natally tend to have issues with self-worth. They inherently come into this life feeling unlovable. They feel like they're not worthy of unconditional love. And there's not usually, sometimes there can be a reason for this based on their upbringing, where maybe they, you know, the love was conditional or something like that. But usually that's more like a Venus inconjunct energy. The Venus retrograde energy, even if they were like loved and doted on and all of that, they feel like they're not truly worthy of unconditional love. So they're always trying to prove that they're worthy of love by giving and doing and, you know, being this really awesome person. And usually they're very, very lovable because of this, because they're like always caring for other people. They're always trying to show up in that way. But, you know, when Venus goes retrograde, there can be issues of feeling unlovable, unworthy of love, feeling like you're not good enough. There can be issues with your self-image, like very physically, where you feel like, oh, I, you know, look awkward right now, or you just don't feel comfortable with your body or your appearance in some way. And those things can come up, especially, you know, if Venus is transiting in certain positions. So it kind of depends on where it's transiting. But this is also not a good time to make like major luxurious types of purchases. So if you're like, I want a brand new, you know, Mercedes Benz or something like that, where it's like a luxury, like you don't need that, but you want it, it's probably going to backfire on you. But it's a really great time for being frugal and getting really good deals on things. And so one of the things that I love to do with Venus retrograde is to like go thrift shopping, or to find something like furniture that I want to repurpose and make beautiful again, things of that nature. But like getting something brand new is usually not a good idea. So we talked before about like a used car, right? Like buying a used car would be a great thing to do during a Venus retrograde, because you would probably get a steal on that. But buying that Mercedes Benz that's brand new, you're going to regret that later. Like that's going to come back to bite you. So you don't want to do that. And it's also about letting go of physical attachments to things. And that's part of that Venus retrograde too. So letting go of things very physically, and letting go of old relationships too. Like old relationships can come back around during that Venus retrograde. And it's kind of like you have to resolve something and move past it. Or, you know, sometimes it'll come back around and stick, but usually if that does happen, it doesn't stick forever. So you have to kind of be wary of that. And new relationships that are formed during the Venus retrograde, that's a big thing, because they'll appear to be one way, but you'll misread them. And so when Venus goes direct, you'll realize that this person is not who you thought they were, or something about that relationship or the dynamic is not what you thought it was. And so when it goes direct, it probably won't last. That's why they say like not to enter into a relationship during a Venus retrograde. If it does last, it's not going to be what you thought it was initially, which can be good sometimes. Like you think this is like some nuisance in your life, and then all of a sudden it's like the best thing that ever happened to you. That can be part of it too, but it has to start off as a nuisance, right? It has to start off as something that's not so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like I just rambled a lot about like Venus retrograde. There's a lot with Venus retrograde.
No, and that is great because I think a lot of people, obviously, we have retrograde planets all of the time, and I know like you have tons of knowledge, so I wanted you to let people know like how you can work through a Venus retrograde, because it doesn't happen very often, right? It's once every 19 months, is it?
Yeah, it's like just over a year and a half, like something along those lines.
And this it's the same with this card as well. So one of the drawbacks of it, so as you probably noticed, as everybody notices by now, I don't read reversals. This is one of the reasons that when it comes to tarot reading, I say to people, you really need to get clear on using your intuition, because it will inform you of whether you're seeing this, or rather what you're seeing with this card is a healthy expression of it or an unconscious expression of it. And one of the unconscious expressions of the Empress is somebody that is too materialistic, too much in the tangible world, doesn't necessarily give any thought beyond, you know, like their physical wants, needs, or desires. And outside of that, they don't really think anything else beyond it, which is one of the reasons, because it's a card that represents, you know, the tangible world, you know, relationships and connections as well. Sometimes it can see where somebody is meeting all of those physical needs, but is not necessarily touching the person's heart.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's something I was going to ask you about, because Taurus is an energy that tends to hold on to things. It's fixed earth. There's a hard, it's a, Taurus has the hardest time letting go of pretty much anything, but especially material, physical things that they think are rock solid and they think are not going to change. And so that's why a lot of people right now with Uranus and Taurus are having more difficulty than they normally would with a Uranus transit. You have the most solid, most stable area of your life being subject to disruption and change, right? And that's something that Taurus people do not do well with. They don't want to change really quickly. They take a long time. They can get stuck in a rut really easily. If things are comfortable, especially physically, they're going to hold on to that regardless of what else is going on. It's kind of like tunnel vision there. And so, you know, it sounds like there's an association there with this energy as well, like holding on to things material, even if it's to your detriment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the other meanings of this as well. We talked about the beauty industry. Sometimes you can see this expressed, you know, very physically, like people will go too far with the beauty. Maybe they'll wear too much makeup, or they'll have too many procedures done, because it's the things like cosmetic surgery as well. And you can see where somebody's driving at something. It really is that, you know, striving for a perfection, but the bar keeps moving. Like, I can keep making it better, and eventually, you know, it's like anything, if you do it too much, you go past the point of making it better, and just kind of more is not always less, you know, necessarily better. And I think that's one of the things you can definitely see with this card. And yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because especially with the Taurus kind of energy representing the physical world, it does see you not just clinging to things, but, and it's funny you mentioned this thing with Uranus as well, because I've noticed a lot of people, up until actually Uranus went into Taurus, I didn't have that many, my Taurus videos never really did very well. And I, you know, if I go back into my personal history, you know, because I'm an Aquarius sun, I used to say like the one sign I don't really understand is Taurus. And it makes total sense, because we're total opposites, right? It's just a very, very different energy. As soon as Uranus moved into Taurus, my Taurus videos went through the roof. Like, they've just grown and grown.
Well, and you have Taurus on your midheaven too. So like that's, you should have an ability at least somewhat to appeal to those Taurus people, right? That's interesting. Well, Uranus is astrology, right? Uranus on your midheaven in Taurus. So you're bringing all the Taurus people into astrology now.
It's great. Okay, so obviously I know it's a really big question, but what can Venus tell you in a chart? Like, if you were seeing it, what would you look for, like in its associations and stuff?
The biggest thing that I like to look at for Venus is like your love language. So how do you show love and appreciation to other people, and how do you want love and appreciation shown to you in return. And so if you have your Venus in one sign and your partner has their Venus in a completely conflicting sign, it's going to cause some issues because you feel like you're expressing your love, it's not being received properly. They feel like they're expressing their love and it's not being received properly. So that's where a lot of disconnect happens in relationships. And so an example of this would be like, I mean, I've known this all along with my husband, but my Venus is in Cancer and his Venus is in Capricorn. So they're opposing signs, right? And so my way of showing love is like that nurturing Cancerian energy. I love to cook. I love to make sure that everything is taken care of for him, that type of thing. And for him, it's very Capricornian. So he shows up and does things that are very responsible. And he'll like build a garden bed for me or something like that. Or he'll like, fix up the house, or he'll do something very fiscally responsible. And that's how he's showing that he loves me. Like for an example, our last wedding anniversary, he actually got me like a ergonomic setup for like my desk for my office. If I didn't know he was a Venus in Capricorn, I'd be like, that's not very romantic. But like for him, that's him taking care of something that he knows that I need. And it's very literally for my work. Which is Capricorn, right? And so there are different expressions of love. And so you have to understand people's love language. And so like a Venus in Cancer person is going to be different than a Venus in Capricorn. It's going to be different than a Venus in Aries, which is just very direct about what they want and what they need. And they want you to just be very direct with them in return. Or a Venus in Libra, which is another cardinal energy, which would be more demonstrative. Like I show you what I want and I expect you to pick up on that and reciprocate. And they care a little bit more for your needs and they'll pay attention to what that other person needs. Venus in Libra obviously does better than some of the other placements, but you can see how these are all different, right? And so your love language, the way that you show love is a very Venus thing.
Awesome. That leads me on to another question actually, which is great. So because you touched on it there, what are the kind of differences between the characteristics? So like Venus in Taurus versus Venus in Libra.
I mean, a lot of that would be the way that you show love, not just for your partner, but for people that you care about, right? So a Venus and Taurus person would be somebody who would like to give gifts and who would be into that sensory experience. They might cook, like I mentioned before, like just so you can have that experience. They might give you a massage. They want to be touched and cuddled and all of that. Venus and Libra is more, they can still be gift givers for sure. But they're more about paying attention to what the other person wants and needs and then demonstrating their love by doing those things. So it's kind of like, I know my partner likes to do this one thing. I don't like it. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to go do that thing without them even asking me to. And they expect their partner to do the same though. And that can be an issue because they're not being direct, right? But in terms of like what they value, like Venus and Taurus people, they love things that are more luxurious. They love those sensory pleasures, taste, touch, smell. That's what they find to be pleasurable. So if they want to feel good, they're going to go get that massage. They're going to indulge in something luxurious. They're going to buy that extravagant gift for themselves. But they want something well made. They don't just buy things just frivolously to spend money. That's not a Taurus thing. A Taurus thing is like looking at like craftsmanship and something that's really solid and that's going to last a really long time. Versus Venus and Libra, which will buy something just because it's beautiful, just because at face value, it's like aesthetically pleasing. And so there's a little bit of a difference there. So it also looks at what you value. Like Venus in Sagittarius values experience. They value adventure. And so something that would be pleasurable to them would be to do something adventurous and exciting, to go travel or to go meet somebody new or to go, skydiving or something like that. Like it would be a little bit, it's like not what you think about as being indulgent, but their indulgence is like travel, connection to foreign cultures, indulging in some sort of like higher educational pursuit or something like that. Like that's how they would spend their money and that's how they would, treat themselves.
Love it. Absolutely brilliant. That's kind of it. I'm all out of questions. I think the only one that I wanted to ask is just because you touched on it as well, actually. You mentioned Venus in Aries. If you were to see something like that in a chart, what would somebody be able to do as like a remedy for it?
Venus in Aries, a remedy is you have to be conscious of that. So you have to know that, your love language is being very direct with people. And so that can be okay as long as the other person understands what's going on there. But you also have to understand that other people are not going to be quite as direct with you. And so just because they're not telling you what they want or need doesn't mean that they don't want or need it. And that can be part of it too. They can be kind of forceful with their needs and wants in relationships. And other people might be taken aback by that. So it's learning to kind of integrate the opposite energy a little bit, integrating that Libra energy, which is possible, just considering the needs of other people as well. But this is a very passionate energy. And so you can actually use this energy up by like doing something really creative that you're really passionate about and very like taking action on it, right? So actively doing something creative, actively engaging in creativity. And this is a very sexual placement. And so, they like that fire, they like that passion and relationship. And so you have to keep that fire going. That's part of their love language too. Like that's the sexual expression and relationship. And so, and when I talk about remedies, it's mostly just like embracing your chart and using the energy in a positive way as opposed to a negative way. I'm not big on like, take this tincture, use this gemstone and magically things will get better, because it can help energetically, it can help. But if you're not doing anything to work on that, it's not going to do anything. Like it's really not going to help. It's only going to give you that extra oomph for that extra little push.
Yeah, brilliant, perfect. And that actually leads me to the prosperity part of this. So I think this is one of the things that we probably definitely agree on as well when it comes to tarot, when it comes to astrology, rather than coming to it from the point of, okay, well, what's going to drop in my lap? What are you doing to manifest those things, right? And especially with the Empress, what are you, what seeds are you sowing? This is a big one as well. If you can see in the background there, you've got the pine cone. And that actually represents your pineal gland. So it's this idea of not only, not only thinking about something, but actually sowing the seed, planting the seed to say, right, okay, I'm intending to do this, and these are the physical, tangible, actual actions that I'm taking to make that happen. I think a lot of people, when they hear like, oh, this could be a really good financial week for you, it's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, well, that's the lotto win in the bag. Like, yeah, probably not. Like, what are you doing, in terms of your actions to kind of make that happen? How are you meeting it halfway, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very Taurus thing too, like having to do it in a very grounded, very practical way. And that's a thing I get a lot in with readings and things too. People will be like, well, Jupiter transited my second house and I didn't have piles of money falling from the sky. And I'd be like, well, okay, well, what was going on for you then, right? Like, how was your financial situation? Oh, it was good. Everything was taken care of. It was, I made a little bit of extra money doing this and that. Like they think that they don't have to work for it somehow. Like I worked and I made extra money, but piles of money didn't fall from the sky.
Yeah.
Very rarely in life do piles of money fall from the sky, right? It can happen every once in a while, but it's a rare circumstance. And so it is about what you work for. And, that association with that second house and what's tangible and all of that, like that's, part of that Taurus energy too, to a certain extent. So
Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been great. Thank you so much again for doing this project with me. Thank you for being a part of it, and thank you for bringing your insane amount of knowledge to it. It's just absolutely been a blast from start right up until now. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into some of like the gnarly cards as well.
yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been awesome. And I'll see you next week. And if you want to follow the entire series, you're going to have to subscribe to my channel and to Raphael's channel, Radiant Reality. I'll post a link down in the description below. I also create a playlist that has all of these videos in order, and I'll post a link to that too, so you guys can follow along with the series. And thank you guys so much. I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much.